This rebellion is at an end. The Agapians flee to their stronghold in the north. This land is mine! Now Attenuation rises from the south. Kill them all! Throw the Daws back into the desert. Their forces will crash and break against the bulwark. If the wall falls, we must retaliate. Ready the ships! Long has Attenuation remained safe from my fury. No more. They dare to strike out at us. Their city will fall. Their people will bleed. Their knowledge will burn. My reign will never end.
Hello everyone and welcome back to another Chivalry 2 stream. Thank you everybody for joining us today. Hello to everyone in the chat. We're super stoked today. I'm joined as always by our associate producer Moon, and our special guest is Mr. Buckley himself, who is our audio director engineer here on Chivalry 2 and Torn Banner. Thank you for joining us, Buckley.
Hi. Yeah, nice to be here.
I actually want to
good to see ya. Oh,
yeah. I'm going to start off our stream real quick. Before we get into everything with Buckley, I do want to just go over a post that we put up yesterday. In case you haven't seen it, it was a post-launch FAQ blog post over on chivalry2.com, which is where you can find all of your Chivalry 2 news. In addition to our other social channels such as Twitter, Discord, Reddit, we're everywhere. But our blog post went up on chivalry2.com that goes over some of the kind of frequently asked questions since we launched on Steam just on this Sunday. It's hard to believe that we're getting close to the end of the week and launch was Sunday already, but in this post kind of goes over kind of like the hot topics. So I'm not going to go line by line, but I do want to let you know that if you have a question that you feel like hasn't been answered, definitely head over to chivalry2.com, check the blog. It goes over probably what you're looking for, including some bug fixes that we're working on, some map balance changes that'll be coming hopefully next week. If you can't get your Steam exclusive cosmetics working, if you can't get your horse keybinds working, basically, if you need some help, start there first, and there's probably an answer for you.
Perfect. I can't believe it's almost been a week already. Like
I know.
Going in and playing every night. Like it's so much fun to join you guys in the game.
We've actually been hosting streams from the community over on our Steam store every single day. So if you're, maybe at work and you can't actually play, but, you want to watch somebody play, head over to our Steam store, especially over Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We're going to be hosting members of the community playing live gameplay there pretty much 24/7, or I'm going to at least try to host it 24/7. So you can join in there, have a chat with some people talking about their Chivalry 2 experience as well. But
I'm glad you got community members to do it. Because they're so much better than us.
I don't want to say it. They definitely are better than me. I will say that. I would say there are some people who on our team who are like on our development team who are, on a higher skill level. Me, not so much. The highlights of my games are usually if I run into Moon or Buckley and we just kind of use voice lines and, do emotes at each other.
Yeah, Buckley and I especially, I think whenever we see you or each other, we'll like either, I've teabagged sometimes, I will say, but aside from that, like it's like all voices all the time, and we take full advantage of that.
Yeah. What about, do you feel like you're good, Buckley? Good at Chivalry 2, or are you just kind of goofing it?
No, I do think I'm good, but I just play pure chaos. And just because I don't fight like anybody else, it ends up in victories a lot.
Love that
Yeah, I like
question.
going up against Steve Piggott, probably one of our better players. I'll even get him sometimes because it's just, yeah, just utter chaos.
Do you feel like you're good?
You know,
Usually, in the middle of the pack when it comes to
Yeah,
the
that's
development team. Unfortunately, we've hired a lot of good gamers. I used to be at the top. Now I'm in the middle.
I know, like in the last year or so, we've hired a ton of people. I think we're close to like 70 people on the team now, and some of the new ones they come in and they're already fans of the game, and they've probably spent a little bit more time, getting good at it because they, really enjoy it. And they definitely kick my butt.
There's no better method to keep your ego in check than that.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of excitement in the chat. I want to acknowledge a lot of people saying, "Is that the Ryan Buckley?" It's him. It's him, guys. He's here. I actually want to give you a chance to kind of introduce yourself, though, for people who maybe don't know who you are and don't know what you do and what your role is. So I wanted to give you a chance to kind of talk about your background before you got at Chivalry 2, and then, maybe how's your career been since you've been a part of Chivalry and Torn Banner?
Okay, yeah. Ryan Buckley. I'd been handling the audio for Torn Banner. I mean, actually, since the Age of Chivalry mod, so we're going back like 2007 or 8, I think, on that. But yeah, so a lot of practice, sort of, working in the same genre and the same game. The game's always fun, and it's it never gets old for me, even though I've been doing it for a while. But before I worked on Chivalry, I'm actually dropped out of college to kind of just playing rock bands and just did odd jobs. And I sort of stumbled into the industry because I was in Boston at the time, and my job at the time I was a flyer, so I went to campuses and put notices on bulletin boards for like tutoring, stuff like that. And I was in Quincy, Mass, and I noticed at the time that's where Rational Games Studio was, and they were advertising, come QA our new game Bioshock. System Shock 2 is my favorite game of all time. There's excellent audio in it, story. Just I love that game. So I almost didn't call them because the way I saw it, I was spoiling a game I was waiting for 10 years. Spiritual successor to the System Shock 2. But yeah, I ended up doing it. It was a great experience. Just being part of a development team, and I'd never thought about working in audio for games. And I was talking to you guys earlier, saying that thinking back, I used to play mods of like Quake, like some of these early games when the mod scene first started taking off and exploding. And I was already like, I don't like that gun sound. I'd take it out, put a new one in. The soundtrack, I would take, my favorite music and put it in. So I was already kind of sound designing without, and again, never thought like you could make a career out of it. But when I was at Irrational Games, and you guys know how it is, there's a lot of people who do QA because they love QA, and there's a lot of people in QA who are hoping to maybe branch into other parts of game development. And so speaking with, other people on the QA team, they asked what I did. And I was like, I'm a musician and record music. And I think I floated some CDs out and they really liked them. They were like, wow, you should do game audio. And I'm like, I should do game audio. So a lot of these guys were working in Unreal Engine on the side. I think it was just like 2004 or something. Like it wasn't called Unreal Engine anything yet. It was Unreal Tournament, I think, came with an engine you could work with.
Yeah.
But anyway, so they would give me their like demo levels, and they all wanted sound in them, because they were just quiet levels. So I would go in and put sound in them, and it was going well. And then long story short, by the end of the cycle when Bioshock was done, I had made a demo reel for the audio team, and yeah, slipped some of those levels in I had sounded because I heard they were going to open an entry level position. They actually gave me that job, and I was going to work at my favorite game company. And when I went in my first day a week, they told me I think it was their publishing company, told me they needed to trim some of the new positions they had requested, and my job got cut.
No.
Yeah, so that hurt. But I think Jim Bonney was the director at the time, just great guy. I think he's still in the industry. Pat Balthrop um, was the guy who did all the sound for the original Bioshock. They took me out to lunch and they sat me down and helped me like get my resume together and stuff. So I ended up doing QA at a company called Turbine, who did Dungeons and Dragons Online and Lord of the Rings Online. and I would eventually do sound for those games for a couple years. But this is how I discovered Chivalry, because one of the guys who was helping make the mod Age of Chivalry for the Half-Life engine was in the QA pit with me. And I was like, wow, this game is so fun. Like, why isn't anybody doing this night game? Like, this is great. And I was like, I can make it sound better. And I think they had an audio guy at the time, but he was kind of, he wasn't around all the time. And they liked my audio. So I just sort of moved into that position. So yeah, I was sounding Age of Chivalry from the QA chair, and then when I went to do audio for the games, we'd made the decision to go to Unreal Engine and try to make a commercial product. So, I was working all day audio on those MMO games for Turbine, and then I'd come home and I'd work all night on Chivalry. And this went on for a couple years of development. Chivalry might have been like 3 years, the first one. I don't remember, but yeah, it was such a hit at launch. It was great. Um, Steve said we're going to open a studio, and they wanted me to come out. So yeah, I left the job, and I've just been pretty much working on Chivalry ever since.
And you've been around since day one.
Yes, yeah.
And with Chivalry too, and like the Tenosian invasion, it's one of the main things that I'm hearing from the community is just how awesome the audio and environments are. And so, like for you, being such a small team for the audio team, like what's that like, just to almost be single-handedly responsible for that?
Oh, I mean, it's a blurs.
Yeah.
It's you're responsible for everything. That's also good because I feel like I know where everything is. If um, Yeah, I don't know. It can get tiring. I mean, the thing is like it was different because when I was the only guy for Shiv 1, there were 12 other guys making content. Now we're up to like 70 guys. And yeah, so and this is where Mark came in, has been just essential in getting audio out for Shiv 2, because I really don't even have that much time. Like I'll test my work a little bit. But Mark always would fall behind and just save me that time and make sure things were working to spec, make sure that the programming was solid. And so yeah, I'm not completely alone, thankfully.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
But no, it's fun, and it's something I can be really proud at the end of the day. Be like, yeah, I did these games, and usually there's an audio team, and yeah, hopefully there will be.
You never know.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
never know. uh, you guys sent me this screenshot. Let me see if I can get it on the right screenshot here.
Okay.
This one right here. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about the workflow for audio in Chivalry 2? And also basically what I'm showing on screen right now is the software that you guys use. I'd be interested in hearing a little bit more about that side of things.
Yeah, I don't know, Mark. Do you want to talk a little bit about it?
Sure. Yeah, we can both like piggyback off each other. I think. Perfect. The workflow really depends on what you're working on. Like if for audio, it's this one specific. It has its own system, and I think when you're dealing with audio, there's so many subsystems depending on what you're doing. This particular example is the melee impact system. So I took a great sword example, and this is if you look at the hierarchy, like we're definitely dealing with a lot here. You have the switch container, which defines it as the great sword, and then just under that is all the potential different attack types that you can have. You have this branching tree, so you're going into the attack 1, which I think is just the basic slash, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
The attack 2 might be the heavy slash. Attack big. Oh, sorry, there's attack heavy slash. Yeah, there's I'm thinking of all different attacks here. Just looking very briefly here, we have the core body shot sweetener. We have the impact throne. Everything has to have like a unique set to help define that per weapon, and it's exponentially bigger. But when you're playing an impact sound, it's not just one sound that you're playing. It's a whole system. If you want to talk a bit more about that.
Some would say it's too many sounds, but
Oh yeah.
well, I mean, the idea is here because we're constantly engaged, and you're hitting people lots. I mean, the whole game you're hearing thousands of impacts in just probably one map play session. So we had to make it, and I like it to sound more like a simulator than very gamey. That's sort of my approach to it. So what we do, we have all these different. You can see the this block sound in there, but that's the sound of the blade hitting the person, and then we have maybe 8 blood sprays in there, probably more. Then there's a bone sound, and then we have the gore from the slash. Now, if it's a stab, that's a different set. But what you get is you're not going to hear the same impact twice. That would be very rare because we have 4 different containers and randoms with like 8 to 16 sounds in them, and that's sort of the core of the melee system is keeping it fresh, and so you're not like, oh, that's my favorite impact sound. Like, oh, I'm glad I heard that one again. Like,
You're never
it's
gonna hear it
hard to
again.
yeah, it's hard to do in a game. But even before that, if you look, there's an involvement switch. So because there's so many players playing um, and there's so much impact sound, we figured out pretty early that we can't have these giant impacts for everybody, for every hit that you're hearing, because you'll think you're getting hit, you'll think you hit somebody, but actually someone else hits somebody off screen. So what we have here is if you're involved, so if you got hit by this impact or you hit somebody else, you're hearing the involved switch there. And if somebody else hits, we have a much smaller, quieter, less is more sort of impact set to that. So that's what gives the audio space for you to really feel what's happening to you and what you're doing to other people, and the other stuff kind of goes into the background. And it's I told Mark to go here because this is one of the more convoluted systems that we have, and we realized there was no vertical panorama to show you just actually how much this goes into the greatsword. And we try to do custom sounds. I mean, I'm pretty sure all these weapons have their own custom block sounds, their own custom impact set of the weapon hitting, because we really wanted all the weapons to have their own personality, and we continue that to this day. When we get a new weapon, it's generate all that again.
And like some weapons more than other, like they're super unique. One of the fan favorites is the shovel bonk. We have the maul bonk. Like it's awesome. Yeah. And
blunt.
Yeah,
you can't lose with blunt sound effects. Like I wish it was just blunt weapons. It'd be amazing. Swords are fun to. I mean, swords, the way the sounds are, to give you more of a clean, like professional kind of sounding kill to it. But yeah, two-handed hammers is where it's at.
Yeah, especially so we have the whole system here, but it also has to interact with the code part of the system too, because when you do a call for a sound effect, like you were talking about before, Buckley, we have the impact. So there's these are events that are played, but there's also switch containers, which are basically just choosing how you play each of event, but then it has to go into multiple layers. So you might see in the profile, you might see something like impact attack 1, which is one switch. You have involved, which is another switch. You have the kind of weapon that's being used,
armor type.
It has all the layers associated with it. It's pretty crazy. Yeah,
I think there's truly a substantial amount of sounds that the average person, and I can consider myself the average person, is you don't really realize just how many sounds are going in to make up the sounds that you're hearing. That you threw out a number of about 70,000 sounds while we were talking before this, and I just was flabbergasted to hear that is a potential amount of sounds for Chivalry to have.
Yeah, marketing was into our sound library, just for the marketing assets, for if they want to do something independently. And so I literally looked yesterday, and we were at 77,000 sounds, and something like 29 gigabytes of audio. And then so we did the math, like if it was 3 years working on Shiv 2, that's like 70 sounds a day or something. A lot of that is VO that we'll get back all at once. It'd be interesting to see how much of that actually is VO. But
now imagine trying to QA that too. Like let's say we're playing in a match, and this happened actually for the Attenuation release, which I think we're fixing up. Is there's one sound of the 70,000 sounds that had a global attenuation, I think, which means that no matter where you are, you hear it at the same volume. And luckily, that wasn't a very common sound to hear, which is why it didn't get picked up. But we were profiling for a while, and just someone reported in playtest, this one sound, and we're like, oh crap, okay, let's figure this out.
Yeah, needle in the haystack, go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, oh my god, it's a really fun challenge though. It's part of the reason why I love working within these systems.
Definitely one of the big key feedbacks about Tenosha in particular has been the sound, and just how much people feel embedded in what they're doing and embedded in the maps and the gameplay and all that. One of the comments that stood out to me was it feels like you're part of a real battle. So it doesn't feel, I guess it feels very natural to the Chivalry world, where you're hearing the sounds, like the weapons being thrown by you, cannonballs soaring, horses stomping, all of these things combined together, not to overwhelm you, but to involve you in what's going on. And that's one of the things that's kind of magical about audio in particular. And I
Yeah.
think that everybody in chat pretty much agrees that Chivalry 2's audio is very immersive.
Well, it's funny because I've worked, I've done side projects. I did a game called Albino Lullaby, which was a VR first person kind of horror, like a trippy thing, and such a joy to work on. Um, and for the main reason is it's a single player game. Single player games way easier to do audio for because you're controlling the narrative already. We know certain things are going to happen. It's just you. It's you throw in 60 players and they all play different, and just yeah, that it's night and day. It's very difficult, but I've done it. I sort of understand it very well because it's I've done it like over 10 years or something at this point. Like um sometimes I'll get people will give me good ideas, for sound from time to time in chat, and some of the ideas they aren't because I just know like that will never work with 60 players. Like that's,
One of the
no.
systems we didn't talk about that's very much relevant to what we're talking about right now is not only do we have all these different switch containers, but I think we have a distance system that was very much something we talked about going into the game. Do you want to explain a little bit about how it works?
Yeah, so all those different, containers, even in the impact, like I have the attenuation is what we call how you hear it over distance. And you can do different things with it. You can add like a low pass filter to make it sound muffled at a certain distance. You do something called spread, sort of within a close range that it really takes over a stereo kind of like effect. Um, yeah, and attenuation. I mean, that's tricky. That's probably took some of the most time just in overall development. It's one thing to have cool sounds, but it's like, well, how far should we hear this, and how will this not be distracting for some people? And
Mhm.
this was a particular challenge with the horses because they're so unique in that everything sort of moves at the the rate of a guy in plate mail. Aside from arrows, which real fast, they were pretty easy to do. So now all of a sudden we have this thing that's moving, like a horse. Like I don't know how fast horses go, but anyway, so getting the footsteps for them because okay, I sounded a horse, it sounds cool. Oh no, now there's 12 of them and it's way too much. And just the fine tuning of making sure that the horses sounded big, were noticeable on approach, were noticeable at a distance when they all came in at a spawn, and didn't get too loud when they were all there, but you could never get snuck up on by a horse. And just that balance was so much attenuation, just micro sliding things here and there.
Every playtest, we had a mix review basically, and we're just like, okay,
Yeah.
let's.
And it got to the point where I thought it was dialed in. At the last minute, a couple people were like, "Oh, they might be too loud." I'm like, "I don't want to touch it. I don't want to touch it." But yeah, with the horses in general, how they sound cool. And this is another thing with the layering. And this is like my music background. How it doing audio for music really works in this sort of overall mix state because you're dealing with an EQ. You can't have too many bass sounds, or you're just going to flood that part. So it's always this balance. And with the horses, they have a set of bass hooves that you can hear very far away. It's kind of the first thing. So when that spawn wave comes out, you'll hear like this rumbling. You're like, oh, they're coming. As I get closer, you start to hear more of the horse hooves on stone, or the physical material they're on. And obviously, we ramped it up when they're close to you, but we really bring that bass up. So if you've ever been passed by two horses, now we're filling your entire queue, and it's just you can almost feel the wind. Like it's a real physical, like kinetic feeling. Um, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
they were really fun to work on.
one of the design goals overall too with the overall balancing of sounds is I think the design goal was to have it feel like even if you're far away, you can feel where the battle's coming from, and we want to have that kind of like ongoing those combat sounds that really stick out. And so we actually have a whole like subset of sounds for that specifically too. It's like we track battle cries, we track some of the death sounds, some of the blocking and stuff, and we add reverb attenuations, which are their own unique sounds. That like something will attenuate out, which is the regular sound, and then we'll bring in those ones at a certain distance, so you can always tell where they're kind of coming from. It's really cool.
Yeah, that was neat. We didn't have that in Chivalry 1. That was something we knew right when we started Shiv 2. We're like, oh, we want to do that. We want to feel like the battle's always everywhere.
Really
So
adds to the
60
cinematic
players
feel.
feels like 1,000 players, you know.
Yeah.
Then you have to optimize, and you have to. So yeah, there's a lot to audio. So okay, everything sounds great, but now server performance isn't, and audio is one of the culprits. You know, they look at you, and Mark had a big hand in this.
So many optimization passes to try to get them going.
Um, yeah, but yeah, it all worked out in the end, and yeah, I'm glad people are enjoying it. I really enjoy it. Like I don't always play that much. I don't play as much as I'd like to. Like we play test a lot. But yeah, with this launch, I've been taking the time almost every day to play, and just big smile on my face. And this game, it just doesn't get old. Like
Oh, it's been great. Yeah.
working on it for 3 years, and I actually want to play it in my free time. Like that's you're working at the right company when that's the kind of games you're making. You know.
Absolutely. I actually would like to jump and talk a little bit more specifically about the sound in the latest update, the Tenoshan Invasion update. There was a question. I'm sorry, I lost who asked it. They were asking like, where do we? Ah, here it is. Durable of Doom. What is Torn Banner's process for sourcing sounds? And what does a Foley session with you guys look like? And perhaps maybe kind of that question, but more specific towards the Tenoshan content.
Oh, okay. I try to guide it to Tenosia, but don't do as many Foley sessions as you might imagine, and would probably do more if we had a bigger team. But I personally invested in a ton of sound libraries, and this is before even before making Chivalry. You know, I needed the source material to work from. But
Mm-hmm.
what I try to do, like I don't buy like, oh, here's a great sword hit. Oh, great, I'll just slip that into the game. Like it doesn't work like that. Our plate mail sound, a lot of that I took from like car crashes or just somebody beating like a car hood with a hammer. Like I would find the sounds from places you wouldn't typically look, and you could listen to the sound of a car crash and it may be like 5 seconds long, and if you listen closely, like there it is, there's this impact sound, and you just cut this little snippet out. So yeah, more I'm trying to think of things I did do Foley on. I think crossbows I did Foley. I like recorded a toaster.
A
Um,
toaster? That's awesome.
yeah, for like the spring sound. I've done other Foley for the games. There wasn't a lot in Shiv 2. It came so fast and furious.
With such a
Yeah, that's
large
okay.
cast too, it's a matter of like a matter of getting the right sound and efficiency too, because like when we're making
Yeah.
70 sounds a day.
Yeah,
You gotta
you
move
can't spend a
fast.
week
Yeah.
ordering. I really would love to do this someday. They'll get a stone table and just smash fruit. But other people have already done it. So yeah, when it's essentially a one-man audio team. This is what Mark said. We don't really have time to
Mm-hmm.
take it like that. It'd be cool to do more in the future. We
I
were
love
gonna go out and record horses, which is sort of a logistical nightmare because you want a horse to do what you want it
I
to
can only
do.
imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, but again, there was a library. I use Boom libraries are very good. They're expensive, but they do really great capture. And they just happened to release like a horse set, and I was like, perfect. I knew they would have great sounds in there. So most of our horse sounds, I think, came from that. But then even like the bass hooves that we talked about on horses, those were like subwoofs. I think kick drums.
Really? I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
Yeah,
That's
you
really
have to be
cool.
creative you don't want to just look up a sound and be like, I want this hit. You
Mm-hmm.
like you were saying, Buckley, it's really cool that being a sound designer affords you the opportunity to just kind of like browse around almost and see what's cool and what's different that people aren't expecting.
yeah, and you said, people want to know about the Tenosian horn, and just yeah, briefly. I mean,
Oh,
I'll
everyone
take it
loves
just
the
2 minutes to
Tenosian
say.
horn. Yeah.
So I hate to disappoint anybody, but that one pretty much came out of the box. But horns have been the most crossbows and horns were the most difficult sounds to make in all these games. And the thing with the horns is like what a medieval horn sounds like. Do you know anybody who has one? I don't. Like a shofar, I could go to a temple and borrow a shofar, but I wouldn't be able to get sound. So now I gotta get the rabbi over and stuff. And yeah, so Those I think were stock sounds too. I think the Agathian one I might have made out of actual brass instruments because that's easy. But yeah, the animal horn stuff was rough. So I got way ahead of it because it's an ocean horn, and I'm picturing Lord of the Rings, like the Haradrim coming in on the elephants and stuff, and I really wanted something exotic for it. And just what Mark was saying, like I was all over. I have a giant sound library, and I was everywhere. And I looked today where I got it from. I got it from like a trailer, like so that horn was supposed to be like a trailer, like scene switch, like or something. But yeah, it sounded because yeah, your options if you don't have these horns, which don't, and there aren't a lot of recordings. I've looked for like 10 years, for these.
Hmm.
Um, so this one, it didn't. It had a little synth to it, but it sounded like it could still be natural. It had like a lot of air to it. So I tried it. Yeah, and in-house, it was people really loved it in-house too. There's not everybody likes everything, so there are a couple people like, oh, it's a little too sci-fi or whatever. But we're a fantasy game too, so I think that
Yeah,
allowed us to, the fact that it was a new faction and they're exotic. So why wouldn't their horns sound
it's cool with
exotic,
the
right?
Tenosians because it gave us some possibilities to go in different directions with the sound design.
Yeah.
I saw some great comments. One of the one of the streamers or then the viewers is like, "Oh, I have one of those horns. My uncle was a Tenosian."
I love because it's so funny. Our game is like funny and there's a lot of humor in it and stuff, and like it attracts the right people in our community too because they're hilarious. I'll play the game and I'll look at chat and like I'll just be laughing. Like people are so funny.
Oh, it's so much
Even
fun.
if they're making fun of stuff in the game, like I don't mind. It's like we have a
Hmm.
great community.
Uh,
Um,
for the on the topic of Tenosian, I wanted to talk about a little bit about the process of sound design when it comes to maps. So maybe adding some map specific sounds, making the environment feel very immersive. I know that in particular, there's some like little sounds added, like monkeys, frogs, all that kind of stuff. Um, do you want to talk us
I'll
through
talk
what the process
briefly.
is? Yeah.
I'll talk briefly and I'll throw it to Mark because Mark actually handled the lion's share of the ambience on
Ambiance.
Snowsian maps. I kind of came in behind it and polished here and there, but
It was a
he did a
big
great
team
job.
effort, but yeah, we have it like
Yeah,
pretty much down to an art now, eh?
yeah. But I do a lot of field recording for ambience. So I would say probably 80-90% of the natural sounds I've just gotten camping and traveling. I took when we're dead in between a game or something, that's when I'll be like, hey guys, I'm gonna go out for a week and record sounds. And so yeah, a lot of that I heard first person and recorded. I think one of my favorite and this is so small, but when we did Gallencourt, we there's sort of like an under the docks water sound, which is a very different kind of sound, and you've heard it before if you've been on it. And I actually got that. I think in Niagara Falls on the Canadian side, there were these giant rocks that were there sort of to keep from flooding happening, and they had these natural caves in it, and just water sounded so awesome going in and out of it. I'm like, all right, I'm recording that. Went back to where I was staying, brought the recorder out, and just recorded that for a while. Anyway, that ended up in that mat, and I knew like I hadn't used it before. I'm like, someday I'll find the perfect spot for this.
It's meant to
And
be.
yeah,
And then we found it.
found it. Our level designers found it. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Um, but yeah, I mean, Mark can speak to the Tenosia maps.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think one of my dreams going into the industry was always to, I guess, to sound an environment, and so I just want to. I'm super thankful for having the opportunity to do that. I've done it on some previous maps. Usually the way it works is I'll do an initial pass, and then Buckley with his best skills will come in and just like keep some stuff, and then do the final polish for it and everything. When I was approaching the Tenosian maps, I really wanted to. Find like we reuse some stuff but find new ways to keep it really fresh, and I think with the desert it was this very specific challenge because what does a desert sound like, and a lot of it's sometimes like a void, right? So one of the initial things I did was I did an initial pass in the desert, got new sets of animals, so I was really happy with the occasional monkeys in the trees and like things when you're walking around, and they don't sound all the time, so you kind of just have to stay in different spots and listen for it. But one of the big things I did was to really segment the space was a new sand sound effects that I found. So I can't remember exactly what I used for the sand trickling, but I designed it in Wise so that if you're standing in the spot, it'll trigger randomly around you at different distances and different volumes. and it's very subtle, so you won't really hear it too much unless you're actually listening out for it, but it really helps add to the space. And so that kind of like triggers occasionally throughout different maps, and keeps things it's a nice desert sound effect that like doesn't necessarily exist the way that it does, but it worked well.
Yeah, that tech that Mark's talking about, we use it like in our night maps. The crickets, they're not like a stereo file of just crickets playing, because I know people will figure that out. It's that same system. There's,
Yeah.
20 different cricket sounds, and it's just as often as you would hear a cricket, it's firing off these like tiny little, 50 millisecond or whatever. And yeah, it just feels way more natural. But yeah, we always try to put that extra effort. And it's funny because, like, we'll work really hard in the ambiences. In the end, you just hear a bunch of screaming and smashing.
Yeah.
And sounds like car wrecks everywhere. So it's kind of like in lulls and weird parts is the only time probably, people are getting to enjoy them as much. But yeah,
Mhm.
we really do, try to go the extra mile on the ambiences too.
And I think it pays off when we do have those quiet moments. Like, even when I'm testing in the game and there's nobody else kind of in these maps, like I'll just go around and you really want to be careful with like where like the water is coming from and how far the water should attenuate and how many water nodes do we want to make it sound right, and like what the distances are. And when you get it right, it makes all the difference. And it's just amazing.
Yeah, it's super relaxing. Like, sometimes I'll be like, Mark, I'm gonna do this one, and it's mostly because I'm just so rattled from doing combat sounds the entire time. I
Yeah.
just want a couple days to be like, listen to those crickets. What about a distant wolf? Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, that's the stuff. Right there.
Back to the screaming and back to the smashing.
Yeah.
I think not necessarily with Chivalry, but audio is often it goes unappreciated because when it's good, it's just kind of a background ambiance that you don't necessarily pick it out. But then when you do notice it, it's usually because there's something amiss and it's standing out in a negative way. But I would say that's the complete opposite for Chivalry. Like when people notice the sounds, they're like, "Wow, that's really nice."
Yeah, I mean that's what's nice about people actually, talking about Shiv 2 sounding great, because to me the best compliment was nobody talked about sound. Like it was like, whew, okay, it's not bothering anybody.
Hmm.
And I think Shiv 1, I think we did get, some props for I think the actual impacts. But yeah, no, it's been great getting feedback from the community who's
Yeah.
noticed the care that we put
Hmm.
into it. But I'm really hard, like I'm really hard on sound design on other games, like really hard. My wife, she always thinks I'm so mean because I'm like, yeah, I'll just call out, any error. I'll be like, really, you're just gonna put a stereo track and call it a day here, like.
That's not how I would have done it.
I have a great aside that should be pretty easy to answer for you, Buckley. Is what kind of Daws do you use? What programs do you use for making the audio?
Oh, I exclusively use Steinberg software, which I think is kind of rare. It's neat though because Wise is partnering with them and getting Nuendo sort of to work in concert. I'm gonna set that up someday. I keep saying that. I keep really busy, but yeah. So I use Steinberg if I'm doing multi-track. Like if I'm building a loop for ambience, I may put them in the multi-track. But I'd say the lion's share of the work I'm using Wavelab, which is just full feature. It's got great batch processing.
Batch
Yeah,
processing is important for this.
yeah, and your effects chains, it's all there, but it's just, yeah, I don't know. I've really always loved Wavelab,
Mhm.
and I've used other things in the past. I think Cakewalk Sonar. I don't even know if they still, excuse me, make Cakewalk anymore. But yeah, no, I enjoy the Steinberg software. I can't imagine using anything else.
Yeah, that's true. Mhm.
You mentioned sound in Chivalry 1, and I want to give an opportunity to talk about voice lines, because obviously voice lines are something that Chivalry is well known for. Um, before I go into further detail with you, I'm going to play a quick, let's see if I can get the right video here, a quick sound of a voice line. Oh, there we go. I'm going to play this one. Hold on to your ears.
None shall pass. Ah! Kill them! day to die! After them! Send them to join their families in death!
So I just played a quick clip of the Mason Knight from Chivalry 1. And I wanted to give, the chat a chance to talk about it as well. You actually recorded yourself for some of these voices. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, well, the Chivalry 1 was all done. The Mason Knight also did the Agathian Knight. We pitched him down for Mason. That was Justin Pappas. He was lead level designer on the original Chivalry. He was like a trained actor. I think had a degree in theater. Fantastic. Would love to work with him again on voices. But yeah, they were all just sort of friends because we didn't have a budget making Shiv 1. So the process was simple. If I liked somebody's voice and I knew them, and they were funny. If they were funny, they got to come over because we wanted the game to be light and funny in the VO. But yeah, we would sit out back. Lived in Boston, and I'd get like 3 beers in them. And as soon as I realized they were loosened up, I'm like, all right, let's go, we're doing it. And it just sort of skips past that whole shy, being Mike shy, and get right into it. And then it was a fire drill. But I think at that time, like I would write half the lines. I knew we needed like 16 lines. I would write 8 to get them going, and then I'd be like, "We'll come up with them on the spot," because these guys were funny on their own. So a lot of these guys, were improvising, and we were coming up with lines on the spot. Just when you're sitting and writing and you don't have the actor right there, you wouldn't necessarily come up with, but it were just funny in the delivery or something. So yeah, it's how we did all of those characters. And the one I hear about it a lot, and the Mason Vanguard sounds like he's got a helmet on. Anyway, that was excuse for getting away with audio that poor quality at the time, but we literally had a voice actor right before we were launching the first game cancel. And I had an old friend I grew up with, and he was a very theatrical guy and stuff, and I'm like, he's the one. So I think I took a train to Philadelphia from Boston with my equipment, and we sent I sent some audio from this house, but this apartment in Philly was so echoey and terrible. So anyway, that's why we had to get this guy last minute, and he did a great job. He eventually he became the pirate in Deadliest Warrior, which was I think a fan favorite. But yeah, so yeah, just a shoestring budget, but I still do record some of the voice in house. We outsource a lot of them. But like Berserker is actually my brother-in-law, who's a big boisterous, hilarious guy. And when it came to that voice, I think it was Steve Pickett who was like, "What if we had a guy who just literally shouted the entire time?" And I'm like, "You'll never get an actor to do that because they have other acting jobs. They'll just blow out their voice." But my brother Tim would do that, so he came down for 2 weeks, and we just one day on, one day off, one day on, one day off, and it just shredded this poor guy's
People
voice.
love that voice. Yeah.
Yeah, when he came out, people were like, they should all be like this. I'm like, yeah, they should, but like,
We're gonna wreck some
this
vocal cords for
laryngitis,
sure. Yeah, I actually do have Berserker queued up. I will play him right now.
fantastic.
The wolves run free! Slaughter them all! Release the beast!
What line?
A lot of screams. A lot of screams. Battle cries. Just screaming his head off. And Chad is like, the scream is so long. That's some good lung capacity. Berserker is the best. So I think Chad's a big fan of Berserker.
We improv'd a lot of him too. I do know. I'm pretty sure that Tim came up with the "I like you," and I was like, "Oh, now do I love you?" or whatever. And that is my absolute favorite when I'm him or somebody else is him. And it's just hilarious to hear the spaz. Like he's the only one who ever loved anybody in Chivalry. Like just a random guy to come from. But yeah, it's such a joy doing VO. It's a lot of work. Scripts are thousands and thousands and thousands of words.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about the scripting process. From kind of beginning to end, I imagine you're scripting, and then you need to find the right voice. It's a very involved process. So there's thousands of lines. What adds to it is there's multiple variations of those lines. So like obviously we don't just have one battle cry. There's several. There's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah, so I mean, basically the character idea, Steve Piggott actually usually approves on what character we do, and we all throw out ideas, and we just feel like which one don't we have yet, what would fit nice, and then from there, then I start scripting, and that can be a couple weeks because some days it's flowing, and other days I'm like I don't, you know, it when you try to force the funny, it doesn't work, and you just kind of got to be in the mood. It helps to play the game too, and just be like, oh, it'd be great, because you have the experience yourself in the game. You're like, oh, this would be funny to say this in this situation. But yeah, so that'll take a couple weeks, and then goes through approval because we don't want just one guy, and Steve has been the one doing that. And Steve's a funny guy, and typically will add a handful of jokes, which sometimes have to be tweaked. so that anyway, but yeah, so once we've got approved script, if we're doing it in house, then I get the person over here, we record. But most of these guys I outsource to Hamster Ball Studios, which is run by Randall Ryan, industry veteran. He's great. He's it's just a fantastic director and just been doing this for years. But so yeah, I'll tell him the character. I'll make up like a synopsis of the sheet, and if sometimes we'll give them pop culture references, to kind of guide them towards the kind of voice we're looking for. But we always want them to come up with their own. We've actually heard somebody try out for a different character and just made a character for them. Like we've done that in the past. We're like, that's not what we're looking for, but we're definitely making that guy. So we don't try to guide them too much to let the actors develop the character themselves.
Mhm.
So yeah, then I boil it down to what I feel like the 5 possibilities, and I keep my favorite secret, and I've been floating them to Steve, and I'll float them to Mark too. I'm like, what do you think? And then so then we pick the guy, then we book. It usually takes like 2 weeks to get him in a session, and then those sessions are brutal. We do it all in one session. They're usually 3 to 4 hours. I would say we do them such that we save like the battle cries and the on fire and the falling screams. We save that for the end. Some actors, it's pretty impressive when an actor gets through the whole script and you're like, wow, he didn't lose his voice at all, because usually at some point you're like, okay. And then we try to dial them back. Like on the auto VO, we might be like, okay, just pretend you're shouting to your platoon, not across the field now, because we can run a guy into the ground, but when we go through it, they have the script, and generally these actors are great, and we don't have to go back and ask them to do something again. It's rare. It could be like, a word was off, or the inflection should have been a little different. But generally, like per section, if we're doing yeses, we may go back and ask for 2 different ones to be reread again. Sometimes they do improv and come up with their own stuff, which is always great. But my favorite is sometimes the scripts. I think it was Imposter, Squire Boy were probably the best at doing this. But like I can, I don't see the actor, and I hear him reading ahead to his next line, and he'll just lose it, or he'll lose it in mid-line. Like it's so ridiculous what he's saying. And then so sometimes we have to do several takes of those specific lines. It's a months. I mean, it takes months. I do see sometimes the forums like, oh, I wish they had more of this, and can't take that long. And I
It
don't
does.
respond.
It does take that long.
It takes a lot. It takes a lot of work. But we counted. We have like 26 playable voices or more. I don't remember.
Yeah, and even in the latest update, we added 4. The haughty counselor, jolly chef, grizzled sentinel, professional assassin, and I actually have one of them I was going to play right quick, which is the sentinel. Here we go.
Few here have any hope. We win. Huzzah! Victory for the Empire!
I think Chat definitely has some favorites, which are the battle cries, and I've seen Reddit's response to those as well of the screams that the male characters in particular are screaming. I think I think the funnier the voice lines and the more silly they are, they become fan favorites really, 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 really fast.
Squire 100%.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Was there any challenges with kind of with any part of the scripting, finding actors, any part of that process when it came to the Tenosian voices? Because they are quite different when compared to like Chivalry 1 or even the rest of the Chivalry 2 cast.
Oh, your mic's off, Buckley. There you go. You and I both.
Yeah, no,
turned
that
it
was
off.
that was a big challenge.
Mhm.
There were time constraints at the time because we had horses, we had so much we were working on. And the fact that we wanted an exotic accent, and in the casting we did get some people from Turkey in it. And it was funny, the people that were from the area, I mean, they sounded authentic, but they struggled reading the English right, you know? Like it was sort of hard, like the lines, it felt really weird because the lines, were my North American humor or something, and then they couldn't quite feel how to read it. So we realized pretty quickly that we had to get actors that could just do accents that and it's funny, the grizzled sentinel, he was actually supposed to be like a Khal Drogo style guy. And I think Mark will remember this because at the time everyone's busy, so I was going to him a lot. I'm like, what do you think? And we didn't get a guy that actually pulled off Khal Drogo, and I'm like, what do we do? And then we had Jace Patrick, who was the imposter, came in and he did this whole spin, like he just sounded like this old, just pictured this like 70-year-old guard, this is gonna be just die up on the wall one day. And I'm like, that's awesome. We don't have that guy. Like, that's great. So yeah, he became a totally different guy, and it worked out really well. I had the name Haughty Counselor, one of my favorite, Andrew Wielden Dennis. He made him less haughty and more like angry. So we felt like we had the anger covered by choosing him to play that role, and we had sort of the more comic old guy. But what we were initially shooting for, and I think this came off well, is we didn't want these guys to be these quirky, ridiculous left field caricatures that most of our guys are. We really wanted the Tenosians to feel like a successful culture that worked together. So we imagined, where we would pick demigod, this guy's so full of himself, or Squire Boy. Like, these are very obvious caricatures. For these guys, we just tried to imagine that Tenosians, like, yeah, they have some professional fighters, but also everybody fights. It's this sort of, communal socialist warrior society. So we picked like Jolly Chef, um, Lucas Schuneman played him. He's the guy who's got some of the singing lines. He's probably singing while he's cooking. So why wouldn't he be singing out the battlefield? The professional assassin, the female was the one who was actually trained to fight, and so she's cool as a cucumber, acts like that. Grizzly Sentinel, you got your old guy who's been through it all, the veteran. And then the counselor, he's sort of, he's the snobby noble type, but we reel them back in, and they're pretty much all for Tenosia, all for the Empire, all for each other. We picked a bunch of phrases like that, like, what is it on my blood for yours? Is there you're welcome? It's like you don't need to thank them. They're there for the Empire, where Squire Boy doesn't even want to be there, and Demigod.
Yeah, more so than any other factions, they were just like a cohesive.
Yeah, and I feel that. I actually, I think I play tested exclusively them just to get used to their voices, and it felt different. Like, I felt like we defended better as Tenosians. And maybe I'm just imagining it because it sounds like that when they're using their VO. But yeah, I'd like to think that we pulled that off. The guys in chat, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. Zamboni
considering
Killer. He's saying that the dialogue is great. So it's so cinematic, grizzled, and heroic. He says.
Grizzled and heroic. That's great.
Yeah, it's really fun. And one of the side thing, I'm just randomly bring this up because we had a lot of audio from all the other actors that was around horses, and I get to hear them, like the sellsword calling it a pony the whole time, just cracks me up. Yeah, it's been great just hearing like the old guys have some new lines too. It's been wonderful. It's part of this update.
It's the most voices we've
Absolutely.
ever added in a single update.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy.
I want to
It's
spend
fun to
just
do.
sorry, go ahead, Buckley.
I was gonna say it's fun to do. I'm glad we got 4, and I mean, ideally we would have more. But
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
it's
it's a crunch.
more
Yeah.
difficult than most people think. Yeah.
hmm I just want to spend a couple minutes on the music before we run out of time. I do have a clip. I actually saw somebody at the beginning of the stream mention this specific bit of audio, so you might enjoy this. Here we go. And we're back. So that was the singer who did a lot of, as you obviously heard, the singing for the new Tenoji music. We have a composer who is JD Spears, who worked on the music. While we're talking, I'm also going to just kind of play this in the background, not too loud, so you can kind of still hear us talking. But what you're
That's
seeing
my first
on
time seeing
screen
that.
right now is the orchestral versions of the songs that JD has
Oh.
recorded. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, JD. He's fantastic. He's a killer. I stay out of this guy's way. He's so
praise
good,
him.
and it's funny when we started to get the initial soundtrack. I think he was looking for more direction than I was willing to give him. I just ended up giving him like the old songs. I'm like, hey, if you can work in some of these themes, particularly Duty and Honor, I'm like, because the fans really love that song. That would be great. And he did. He worked in the themes in a lot of songs. And sometimes they're subtle. Sometimes they just come in a minute on a longer orchestration. And yeah, it's brilliant. Yeah, I don't know if you're watching that, but yeah, to see Duty and Honor orchestrated is like bucket list level thing for me. Thanks, JD. That was incredible. But my favorite thing about JD is, and I did some of this with I think the last soundtrack I did was Deadliest Warrior, and with the pirate music, I played a lot of guitars and tambourines. I played melodica and stuff on it. Because when you're doing this music, as we all know, it's a lot of samples. Now that is the actual orchestra. We didn't get actual orchestra for the whole soundtrack, just specific songs. But when you put any real instruments in it, it really does anchor and it sort of moves it further and further away from that obvious sort of sample. And there's a lot of tricks that composers do to make samples sound great, which JD already does. But I know in the Tenosian soundtrack, I believe he had an oud player, maybe Doombeck. He had a percussionist do a bunch of different stuff. And he did that too. Yeah, I showed in the pirate music when we did the fight night music. he was like, yeah, I want to do that. And he was stomping on the floor. He was literally doing, all these sort of rowdy bar-like sounds. But that's what you get from JD is he, yeah, and he went and hired that singer from, I wish I knew her name. All I know is that she's from Egypt, but she's fantastic. And just to hear, because I heard these songs before she's in there,
Hmm.
and then she comes in, it elevates it to a whole new level. And he's hiring these guys. He doesn't have to do that, but he really he's really into making music, and
It really shows his passion.
yeah, he'll want to see the maps. He wants to know what's going on. He wants to know the story behind the fights. One of the cooler things, and Mark will remember, like the intro music.
Yep.
We plan it out, and Mark will go in, and I'll be like, all right, figure out how long it takes for that initial wave of both people to hit, and that'll actually change because the level design changes. And then when we think we know for sure where it's going to be, Mark will figure out what that is, and we tell JD, and JD like has the music, ramp, 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 just for that clash, and it's fantastic. Like just
We did a lot of pre-work for JD. Sorry, do you mind me butting in?
please do, because I know you're part
Yeah,
of it.
yeah. So for JD, like we did that for a lot of the cinematics, but even before release, before we were working on, before we like had music for these maps, I think the dynamic music system was something that came in with update 1 or update 2, I think. And for that one, we literally sent him videos of just the gameplay. We're like, this is the map, and this is kind of the theme. And we have the music on a random right now, but we had like inspiration for this dynamic music system that kind of ebbs and flows throughout the map, depending on like objective balance, or not a balance, but progress and things like that. And it was such a cool addition that I'm really glad we did.
Yeah, it's excellent. Just lots of reminders of what's actually happening, just being cued by the music. You start hearing those strings and horns come in, you're like, oh, they almost took this point. I gotta hold it. I really gotta hold it. And then that goes flawlessly into the 2-minute. We call it the 2-minute music left, but if it's the final objective, we kick in some of those iconic songs. And yeah, and it's great because I know JD. He's done stuff in the past, but I think this is probably one of the bigger games he's worked on. And yeah, we're like excited about the future on working with him because I tell him how things work in Wise and what the kind of things we can do, and he just lights up. He's like, oh, can we do this and that? I'm like, maybe next game, because it's gonna be a ton of work.
Like the trailer music too, and like he's so accommodating for all the edits that come in, and then he just readjusts like the sounds and stuff too.
Yeah, I love JD, man. He's really elevated the game, audio wise.
Especially with the soundtrack, like the Attenuation, it's a completely different vibe, and there were so many things that we had considered. We really had to dive in and figure out exactly what we needed for all the new music that needed to go in. It was like the music intro, it was the cinematics, it was the dynamic music, the trailer music, ending music we didn't have originally, and we needed.
Yeah. Yeah, that came down to the wire too. Like I think it was like one of the last things we did before we locked it down was get his latest versions of that music. It was like a kind of an oversight in the beginning, but once his music came in, it sounded so great. It was just like a train wreck into the old songs. We're like, oh, we can't have that,
Yeah.
And yeah, he very quickly, got it done, and it sounds fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It sounds really different, but yet very chivalry at the same time, which I think is, one of his strong suits, is making all of these different tunes and different songs all sound different and very accommodating to whatever map they're on and what scenario they're on, but they all sound very much chivalry.
Yeah.
Playing in game as well, and having that music in the background when you're screaming your head off, like it's perfect. It fits exactly what we wanted.
We are running short on time, so I just want to give everybody in chat a shout out. Thank you guys so much for tuning in with us today to chat with Buckley and with Moon as always. We appreciate you guys being here with us. In terms of what's coming up for the near future, sometime next week, fingers crossed, we will be putting out patch 2.5.1. The patch notes will come probably next week once we have more of a firm schedule on that. But that's what we're working on right now. And, we've mentioned it a couple times. The next big update after that will be the reinforced update, which will have cross-platform parties and other stuff in there. If you're curious, we'll be updating the roadmap as we always do at chivalry2.com/roadmap. thanks everyone again. Thanks again, Buckley and Moon, for joining us.
Thanks, everybody. I love you guys. Do it again sometime. It's fun.
Absolutely. We will see you on the next stream. I'll let you know the date on that one. Bye, guys.
Cheers.